Let's bring in David Penberthy now, News Corp columnist and the breakfast host at Radio 5AA in Adelaide. Good to talk to you, Pembo. Look, you'd be aware of what a great Australian Mark Ella is, and the story of Edgar Mobb sounds compelling, but you've got to be suspicious here that the rugby world just wanted to disappear Captain Cook.
I think you could quite safely go beyond being suspicious, Chris, and just call it for what it is. I think, as you rightly suggested, it's a preemptive capitulation almost to an imagined foe, one that hadn't yet manifested itself. But, you know, I think that rugby quite clearly has tried to sort of get ahead of a potential Twitter war, potential boycotts by erasing Cook. And I think that the sadness here is we're not talking about the Robert E. Lee Cup. You know,
Yes.
This cup has not been named after the head of the Confederacy, the inventor of the Ku Klux Klan, some genocidal monster. Cook was a great navigator. He was someone who had an immense natural curiosity, and he had a lot of respect for all of the people that he came across, be they the First Nations people of Australia or the Ni Vanuatu people. What was formerly known as the New Hebrides. He's got islands named after him. You know, even a red-hot lefty like Peter Fitzsimons, in his book about Cook, paints a picture of a man who was, you'd call him a sort of liberal humanist, if anything. And this is where it's troubling that in this cancellation age, that will fail to distinguish between people who are the product of their times, people who were nuanced in terms of their legacy, and people who are just outright barbarians. And we just end up junking the lot. And we won't remember anything. We won't stand for anything. I think it's incredibly sad.
It is sad when you think about, what a figure of enlightenment Captain Cook was, and how he helped all of us understand and know the world around us. He cannot be erased from history. We can't allow that to happen. I want to go on to a column you wrote. I love reading your stuff and where you take us in the world around us. And you've managed to convince me this week that pre-peeled carrots that we buy in the supermarkets are a demonstration of why we're all doomed and the world's gone mad. Take us through it.
Well, maybe I'm turning into a grumpy old man, Chris. It was actually inspired by an on-air conversation with a lot of our listeners last week talking about the cost of living. And, you know, we've got a outer suburban audience on 5AA. Our audience skews older as well, being a talk radio station. We were talking to a lot of people who can remember not just the recession we had to have, but the oil shock of the 1970s, and Jimmy Carter addressing the American people saying, you know, just wear an extra sweater to cope with the cold. A lot of our listeners can still remember rationing growing up as kids after the war. And the point I was trying to make was that the pre-peeled carrot is a bit of a modern day symbol for this sense of unbridled sort of convenience and affluence and the myth that we're all time poor. I mean, you think back to, you and I are in our 50s. I mean, our grandmothers grew up without disposable nappies, without washing machines, without dishwashers, without dryers, without bar mixers, all the things that you take for granted as modern labour-saving devices. And while not trying to sort of blithely dismiss the realities of the cost of living crunch that we're all facing now, I was sort of trying to politely suggest to the under 40s, those who've never known an interest rate increase or inflation rocketing towards 7, 8, 9%, that they should just ask themselves the question, what would my grandmother or great-grandmother have done in these circumstances, and maybe start rifling through the old green and gold cookbook to get a few household management tips.
Well, what we used to do, of course, was peel the carrots and feed the carrot peel to the chook, and the chook would lay the eggs, and eventually some unlucky chook would end up on the dinner table. It actually connected us to the natural cycles that we were depending upon.
No, it was a virtuous circle of life. And you know, the other thing is the pre-peeled carrots are actually next to the whole unpeeled carrots that are normally about $10 a kilo cheaper. So for the simple $1.29 outlay of getting a peeler and developing the peeling skill, you can probably start there, along with eliminating some of the Uber Eats and so forth, and save yourself a little bit of money in these troubled times.
I got to tell you, my wife's a bit worried that I'm going to go and work for Adam Bant because I went to do some shopping early this week to make a salad, and I was supposed to come back with some baby spinach, but they're out of baby spinach, so I bought a thing called a kaleette, which is a cross between kale and a Brussels sprout. She thought I'd gone loopy, but they're delicious.
You'll be wearing Hessian pants and going to WOMAD when you're back in Adelaide with that kind of behaviour.
Absolutely, and I tell you what, I'll be barracking for net zero by 2050. Hey, just on this convenience thing too, and the nanny state, this has manifested itself in the northern beaches of Sydney, where the local Macca's just wants to double its drive-through capacity because a lot of people use it. It's on a main road. But the local area health authority has come in saying that they shouldn't be allowed to expand their drive-through capacity because too many people are going to get fat. When is it the business of the health authorities to decide what construction can occur on a main road?
Well, I think what we're seeing there is a bit of post-COVID mission creep from the local health folks who are probably feeling a bit down in the dumps that they're not getting their jollies telling everybody to mask up and stand 1.5 metres away from each other at the local supermarket. You know, we should treat grown-ups for grown-ups. It's not like there's a special sort of toddler's lane that they're installing, or they're not putting a drive-through in the middle of a childcare centre. People have got the right to choose, and you know, I think it's absurd. They should stick to their knitting, and you know, people are allowed to make their own food choices. Surely an extra lane at a pre-existing restaurant is not the kind of thing that should necessitate local government intervention.
I've a mind to get over there, buy some Maccas and get fat just to stick it up them. Hey, you mentioned the post-COVID mission creep. National Cabinet's on tomorrow. Surely it's time for all the states to do what has happened in your state of South Australia. Get rid of those emergency powers. Get rid of them now. No longer needed.
Yeah, look, I think it was a really good thing that Peter Malinauskas did. He cleverly read the room when Stephen Marshall was still Premier and was ceding or rather appearing to cede a lot of his authority to the health bureaucrats and the police commissioner. The local business sector was up in arms about it. And even though we were starting to head down that path, I think that Mally, he picked the mood right, and it was why so many business leaders were openly death riding poor old Stephen Marshall in the lead up to the election, none more so than the hoteliers. We've got rid of masks today at the airport here as well.
Good move.
Which
Let's
is
hope
another sign that we're returning to normal.
Yeah, Malinauskas has been good on this, so let's hope they follow him on that, but not on the climate emergency. You were just talking before about how we've lost touch with reality a bit, where our life is a little bit too easy for us and disconnected. I want to show you a yarn out of Queensland where one bloke who saw that his car was being stolen came up with a very practical intervention by way of a forklift. Have a look.
Police arrive at a Waterford West home to find the case closed. A car thief hung out to dry.
Yeah, just sort it down, mate.
This red Volkswagen Polo, sky high on a forklift.
They can't get out the passenger side because the forklift's there.
Police say the 24-year-old woman inside the car broke into the Waterford West home, had a shower and stole clothing before moving onto the car. Brendan Mills returned home and caught the woman, quickly coming up with a plan while waiting for police. When officers arrived, the car was lowered and the woman was arrested.
There you go, Pembo. The bloke apparently didn't know how to peel carrots, but he could put a forklift to good use.
I think if you're a tabloid newspaper editor, Chris, you might go for the headline, "Fork this for a joke."
A brilliant example of ingenuity there. Thanks for joining us, Pembo. See you next week.
Good on you, mate. Cheers, Chris.
David Penberthy there speaking to us live from Adelaide. If you're in Adelaide, you can listen to him on Radio 5 AA for breakfast. You can read his stuff in The Australian and, of course, in the other News Corp tabloids as well.